Today is Saturday, June 1st, 2013. We are here today to interview Mr. Heflin G May, who served in the U.S. Army during World War II as a private first class. Mr. May was born January 20th, 1920. I am Philip Lee, friend of Mr. May. Also present are Esther, my wife, Dr. David McCoy, Joy Hucks, and Donald Helton. We are in the home of Mr. May in Clarksville, Tennessee. This interview is being conducted for the Veterans History Project at the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C. Good morning, Mr. May.
Good morning.
And Mr. May, if you would, you can just start by telling us a little bit about when and where you were born, and then how you got into the military, what you did in the military.
Yes, my name is Heflin G May, and I was born in a little town in northeastern Kentucky by the name of Hillsboro. And my doctor's name was Clyde Garr, and that's where I got my middle name from. And we lived in Kentucky in Fleming County until I was a year old, and then my father and mother moved to Indianapolis, Indiana. And then the Depression comes in 1929, and we moved back to Kentucky, and I was raised in Kentucky then until 1957. But I done different work. I drove a milk truck for Carnation Milk Company in Maysville, Kentucky for about 9 years. And I quit that, and I was driving for Southeastern Greyhound out of Lexington, Kentucky. And the war broke out. And in about 5 or 6 months I was fixing to be drafted, so I just volunteered and went into the service. At that time, I had 2 daughters, one of them named Barbara and the other named Beverly. And we lived in Flemingsburg, Kentucky, and that's where I went into service from. And I took my basic training. I volunteered, like I said, I volunteered instead of waiting until I was drafted. So I took my basic training in Fort McClellan, Alabama, Anniston, Alabama. And I was a replacement. Went overseas. I joined the 9th Division, 60th Infantry, 2nd Battalion. Went to England and stayed there about 2 weeks at Southampton, landed in Southampton, England, and then we went from there on the LFT, went to cross the English Channel, landed at Omaha Beach, and I was in the Battle of Normandy in northern France, and then I got captured in August, first part of August in 1944, and I was in prison camp. I stayed at, well, it started out, we just walked every day. They'd just keep us back a little bit behind the front lines where the artillery, and you could hear the gun shots going off and all. And they walked us all the time with our hands laced over our heads. We done that every day for about 2 weeks. And they wouldn't give us much to eat. The people along there would come out with bread or something like that, and the Germans would run them off. But anyway, we all survived at that particular time. And then we got in, they put us in what they call 40 homes, and 8 chevaux, and that's horses, and then the men at home in boxcars, and we stayed in boxcars within France there, in the first part of France there. We was in there and stayed 3 days and 3 nights, and all we do was just move over a line or two and wake up the next morning. We didn't wake up because the cars move all night long. Every little bit they move, and they're not like our cars here, they're box cars. They got bumpers on them, and they bump and go, and they're hooked up solid like the cars are in the United States. But anyway, we stayed there in Paris for 3 days and 3 nights in the same train yard there. And then they got there and they took us off of there. We did Chalon, France, then at the camp there for about 2 or 3 weeks. And then we got in, they loaded us up in trucks like horses or cattle in a truck. And we'd riding down the highway and that then, going to another place, another camp, and the airplane would come over, the British especially, would come over and they'd strafe. They'd come in strafing, and the particular truck I was in, well, the man on each side of me got shot by the aircraft, and they both fell. I'm left standing there. I don't know, the good Lord had something for me to do, I guess. But anyway, they got the man on either side of me. And we done that then. We stayed on that truck and they'd let us off about, oh, they'd stop maybe once every hour or two, and we just kept riding and we didn't know where we was going. But anyway, we finally wound up in Moosburg, Germany. And I stayed at Stalag 7A for a little over 7 months. And then in about the last of March, 1st of April, along in there, they moved us from Stalag 7A to Markaponder, Austria, Stalag 317C. And then we stayed there till the war was over. The German guards put bands around our arm. They just took off, so some of us took off. And one of the gentlemen there, one of the soldiers, said he was a lieutenant. So we'd do what he told us to do, but we didn't pay the lieutenant much mind. We took off and went on down the highway there, and they was two of my buddies and me, and we stopped one of these coal burners, we called it, but anyway, they heated the alcohol to make the trucks run. Had wood burners on it. We'd done that, got in there, and we stopped, and they stopped, and they had a man and his family, but we had them to get out on the road, and then we took the truck. I don't know why, but we did. We run it till the thing quit, and then we just got out, and we turned in that night to a engineer battalion that was working on a bridge down below where the line was. So that's the way we done that to start. We said, anything you want, you can have. So we eat a good meal, first meal we'd had to mountain anything for all that time. Never had a bath for that time. So anyway, we got done with that then. Some of the boys went out, they said, well, we're going out and see this and see that, and they did. One guy come back in with, he had about 5 or 6 wristwatches on his arm from his wrist, from up his elbow. And he said they took his watch and he's going to get theirs, so he did. Then we got to different camps there, and to come back, when it was all over then, we turned in, we went to General Eisenhower was there, and well, he wasn't there, but he was in charge, and we went to Camp Lucky Strike in France there, and we stayed there, and they got to feeding us stewed chicken. They just put them big chickens in a big old vat, and no seasoning or nothing. That's what we ate for about 2 weeks. They said that would expand our stomach where they'd shrunk up and all. And my weight was down to 128 pounds. I weighed, well, wasn't ever that big anyway at that time. I weighed about 140 something when I went into service. But anyway, I was down to about 128 pounds. So we stayed there at Lucky Strike for, I think, a little over 3 weeks then before we went to Southampton, crossed the English Channel there, and they gave us a partial payment to go to that end. And so then we stayed. I would come back to the States in I believe it was in about June, I think, a little after June. We come back, left Southampton, come back to the United States. I went overseas on the Queen Elizabeth and come back on the Queen Elizabeth. No convoy, nothing. Zigzag going across. Of course, coming back, didn't have to worry because the war was over. We didn't have no convoy going over at all. So.
Then were you discharged when you got back to the States then?
No, when I got back to the States, they told us we landed at, of course, landed in New York, and they said, well, we're going to send us on. They sent us we got on a train and went to Camp Atterbury, Indiana, and they said anybody would have been a prisoner of war. Of course, when we come back, there's different people on it, different soldiers on it who hadn't been in prisoner. But they said anybody that was a prisoner of war could go home that day, that night. So there were about 7 or 8 people, soldiers stood up. They gave us a thing where we could get out that night, and they gave us a train ticket and all, and leave paper. They filled them all out right then. And I think it was about 7 or 8 of us, all that was there. And then they give us a little partial payment thing and a train ticket to Miami, Florida. And we had 3 months leave at home at that particular time. And we didn't wait for the train that night. We went down to the depot, and they said we had it so long. So we went to the bus station then, bought us a ticket, 2 of us did, and went to Cincinnati, Ohio. Of course, I lived in Flemingsburg, and I had an uncle that worked for the street railway department in Cincinnati. And excuse me, when we got to the bus station in Cincinnati, well, then I called him. He said, don't move, I'll be there in a minute. So he took off work the next day and took me to Flemingsburg, Kentucky, and I stayed there then. Went back to my wife and 2 daughters and stayed there 3 months. I had a brother that, we had 2 brothers in the service, and one of them come in while I was home. We got together. And I stayed there 3 months, and then I reported into Miami Beach, Florida, and they was getting out on the point system, and you had to have 85 points, and I had 83. I like 2 points getting out. So they said, where do you want to go? And I had a brother who was stationed at Fort Lee, Virginia. And I said, well, I'd like to go there. So they sent me, instead of there, they sent me to Fort Myer, Virginia, which is up right at Washington there. And I got up there and drove a bus, and I wasn't there that long anyway, because I got out in November.
Okay. Well, let's back up just a little bit.
Yeah.
To whenever you were captured, what were you in the battle or?
No. When I got captured, there was 5 men of us and a lieutenant, second lieutenant. We called him. Well, he hadn't been a lieutenant. We called him 90-day wonders back in. And we was in this little town there, and it's in France, and the Germans had us pinned down there, and this lieutenant took us in the basement of a house. It was street level, but it was house was up over in the basement there. And the 6 of us went in there, counting the lieutenant, 5 GIs and the lieutenant. And the big tank come out in front of the house or the place, and stopped right out there in the front, and guards come in, and the lieutenant said just would give up. So that's how we got captured. We got captured in this house. There was five GIs. Well, it was all GIs, but 1 officer, 1 second lieutenant.
Well, while you were captured, did you have a routine that you did, or were you? What did the Germans really do to you, besides not feed you good?
No, when the Germans come in there, well, I don't know what they hollered something in German, and the lieutenant told her to put your hand. We just throwed our hands up like this, and that was it. And then they took us out. It was, I think, about 3 or 4 German guards there that had, we called them burp gun paper cutters, more or less what we called them when they shoot that way. Where I've seen them hit GIs that way, and they just fold over just like you took a knife and cut them in 2. We called them burp guns, paper cutters. Some of them called them machine guns, what they was actually.
Yeah.
They carried them.
Well, while you were in the prison camp, what did you do to pass the time?
Well, now when we got to Mooseburg, we didn't do anything. We was in Chalons. I was in Chalons, France, at a prison in there, but I didn't stay that long. Like I said, about 3 weeks or so. But then when they moved us to Mooseburg, it's Dialogue 7A. Well, we was in there, I guess, about 3 months, 3 months and a half. And they come in there and they took people out and put them on farms and worked on farms. I went out one time and worked on a farm digging big old rudabakers or whatever they call the things, you know, about like a turnip, only a lot bigger. And of course they fed you fairly good that way. What they had, more than you had when you was in prison camp. Because they didn't feed us nothing in there, but they called it grass soup, but made out of some kind of stuff, and then didn't have no water to take no bath and nothing. And then coffee was what they'd scorch barley and make the coffee out of scorched barley. That's what they called it.
Mm-hmm.
In that, and then like I say, I went out one time and on this farm, and there was 6 of us. They took us to this one particular farm. Of course, they took others to different places, but the farm I was at, there was 6 American soldiers there.
Mm-hmm.
And we stayed out there. Well, I knew a little bit about machinery, and they had me working on their trucks and different things there. And I didn't have to do too much out in the field like some of them did, but I was working more or less on the mechanic end of their stuff, machinery and stuff going. And then the same farm, they made schnapps, made the alcohol, and they had big bin dug in the floor in this building, this concrete big vat thing, and they had that full of mashed potatoes. They put that in there, and that's what they made their schnapps out of, the alcohol, out of the potatoes.
Yeah. Pretty strong drink?
Huh?
Pretty strong?
Right. Yeah, you didn't want to drink none of that. It was strong, all right. But it was actually what it was. They had the tubing and everything, just like a big distillery or something.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what they made they mashed those potatoes. They had them in there, and man, it was hot in there. They keep them hot. And all that juice come up and went through all those lines in that building there.
And where did you go next?
And then from there, we didn't. I went back and stayed at the camp all the time. We didn't do anything.
Okay. And what was the next camp?
We'd get Red Cross. We started out getting British Red Cross parcels. We'd get one a week, and then a little later on, where they finally wound up with some American Red Cross boxes.
What was in the boxes?
Well, they had little, what we took about like seafood, what you'd call rations, like K rations, stuff like that, like the Army on in different things. They had some cigarettes in there, and crackers, and little cans of cheese, in little round cans of cheese. The boxes, all this, I guess it's about 18 inches probably long or something like that, and all that. And had crackers, had a few crackers and different stuff now.
Well, in that camp, do you remember how many people total were there?
Well, no, I heard, but I believe they exaggerated. They told me, or that's what they said there was about 70,000 British, Russians, and Americans. It was all mixed up in there anyway. And if you had a Jewish name, I know there's several Jewish names, and they'd call them out, and you never would see them no more, so I don't know what happened to them. If they called them out, we had a boy from Chicago in our outfit, in the same room where I was in there, and on the bunks they had 6 men stacked up this way, a bunk. They had 2 beds here, 2 here, and 2 here, just boards with the blanket on them,
Uh-huh.
and that's all, no mattress or nothing, just hard, you know, just boards. And there was six men, and two sleep here, two here, and two here.
Mm-hmm.
Like your Navy have in boats, only it wasn't that comfortable.
Yes, sir.
And but we had a boy by the name of Fogelstein. He was from Chicago, and they come in there, and good boy. And they come in there one morning and called him. He never did come back, never did see him no more, so I don't know what they done or where he went. They'd come in, get out, and then if you didn't get up when they called, they had a dog. The dog get you out of there.
Well, where did you go next?
They just didn't, I don't think the Germans at that time had anything more or less to eat themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, but I don't know whether they would have given us any more if it had it or not. I couldn't say that. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But I know we didn't have anything, and the old saying goes, I don't like to talk about that, but every once in a while you might feel something crawling on you, and you get I guess it was a big old louse about the size of your thumb. It'd come rolling off of you, you get it off, all. And like you had your ODs on. That's what you fought in. You fought in your ODs. You didn't fight in no khakis or nothing like that. And if I'd have took my pants off, I guess they'd have probably stood up by themselves. It's dirty and all.
Yeah.
Stiff.
Mm-hmm.
But I wasn't the only one. Everybody was the same.
Yeah.
Same way. But we had they was all kind of prisoners in there. It wasn't just Americans, it's different nationalities that was in there.
Mm-hmm.
Then when we went down when they moved us from Stalag 7A to Markaponga, Austria, that was down in the Alps, down below Berchtesgaden. And that's where Hitler was at that time, they said.
Mm-hmm.
At Berchtesgaden, they took us right by there.
What was your daily activity there?
Sir?
What did you do while you were there?
There, I didn't do anything. We didn't do nothing. We just stayed there in the camp all the time. There wasn't that many people there at that one.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why they ever sent us down there anyway, but of course, a lot of things goes on when you're there. You don't know what's going on anyway, actually.
Well, did you get fed? Get more food there?
No, the food was about the same. Well, it wasn't about the same. We got about the same amount, but it was a little bit different. And I'll tell you one food we got there that, of course, I'd heard of that in the United States. In fact, we had some people up there around my home that made that they kill a beef or something, and they'd take the blood and what they made a blood pudding. That's what they called it, blood pudding.
Huh.
So they brought that in there, and I had it was all spiced up. It tasted real good until they told me what it was, and it wasn't no good. I couldn't eat that stuff.
Yeah.
It just the thought of it, what it was, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, I didn't know what kind it was. You didn't know whether it killed a beef or somebody else. It might have been somebody.
Yeah.
But they called it blood sausage, I believe is what they called it.
Mm-hmm.
But mostly what we had to eat was boiled cabbage. They had all kinds of cabbage, and we'd eat cabbage. Of course, cabbage is good for you. It ain't gonna hurt you.
Yeah.
But we had all kind of cabbage, but nothing, no meat. I didn't have no meat. Germans didn't have. I don't get they had any meat. And then we made while we was in there, we'd make those little things and had fans. We'd make them ourselves, fans and all. And had blowers on them where you'd have little fires. And get stuff and like that stuff we get in the Red Cross thing. We'd put it in a little old can or something like that, and put the little heat it make it that way. Yeah, I wish I had one of those. That know how to make. We made one. I have to make 2 or 3 of them, different places.
Yeah.
Over then, they call them blowers. Probably seen them or heard of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, where they made them.
Yeah. And from where did you go then?
When we got out of the 317, that's where we turned into the engineers, and then
Yeah.
we come back and they sent us in. We went from there to, well, we went to Nancy, back to Nancy, France, and stayed about a week. Didn't do nothing there, and just lay around and all that, and then they sent us in to Camp Lucky Strike in France, and that's where we stayed in.
How did they transport you?
In trucks, and like when we was in the prison camp, when we was a prisoner, they transported us in trucks, just like you'd be standing up, just like cows or something like that. They just line you up around the truck, and they had Red Cross things on them so that planes wouldn't strafe, but they still did. And then in boxcars, I was in a boxcar for about a week. And that's one supposed to hold 40 men or 8 horses. You couldn't see out. You couldn't do nothing there. But they, like I say, then we was in Paris for 3 days and 3 nights, and we moved every little bit. Just be a track or two over for 3 days. We were in that.
Why do you think they were moving you like that?
I don't know. I couldn't tell you. They done that for 3 nights and 3 days before they took off. And the French would come. The train wouldn't move too much in the daytime. It'd do all this moving mostly of the night. And the French people would come with a big, long bread. Of course, wasn't no just out carried it in their arms like stove wood.
Yeah.
And they'd want to feed you, but the Germans would run them off. They wouldn't let them give us nothing. There. Yeah.
And where did you go from there then?
I went from Camp Lucky Strike to Southampton, England. Then I was over there about a week, and I've got a check in there somewhere that we went out. They gave us a partial payment, but we ran out of money when we went to Manchester, where we went first, Manchester, England. And of course, there was 3 of us together, 3 GI. When we left there to go over there, they took us across there on a boat to United. Of course, we was back in the United States authority then. And anyway, they took us back over there to England. We got over to Manchester. And we went to the pub. That's where we first took off, to the pub,
Yeah.
Get some beer. And we got over there, and of course the beer over there is hot. They don't serve it cold like they do over here, or did at that time. I don't know what they do now. But anyway, we ran out of money. About a couple of days later, we didn't have no money. And some guy from Somerset, Kentucky, come in where we was at there in the room. He said, I found out where you get some money, and the other 2 said, where? I said, down here at the bank. We thought he was going to hold up the bank. So anyway, we went down there. He took us down there at the bank. And he said, go right in here and get it. So I'd done business at the People's Bank in Flemingsburg before I went into service and all. And I figured, well, maybe my wife still had a account there and all. So I went back, and the guy over here at the window said, where are you going? I said, I'm going in the office here to see about getting some money. He said, get that over here. So I went over and they said, who's the bank president? I told him what bank. He asked me, what bank and where. And I said, he had a big old book there, and he looked, said, he still is. I said, how much you want? Well, they let us have 3 pounds at $12.
Had a lot of money then, though, wasn't it?
Well, and the check is about that, it's a foot long, and I guess about 4 inches wide. And I told them the People's Bank in Flemingsburg, and they sent that, and the bank had it on, put it out where everybody could see it. That's the only one they ever got in the war at all. That from overseas, that's the only check they ever got. And then later on, they give it back to. I've got it.
You still got it then?
I still got the check. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, of the ones that were actually captured with you to start with, did y'all stay together through all of that?
No, no. There was about 6 or 7 of us the five of us, and I don't know where the lieutenant ever did go. I never did see him after about the second day. He disappeared, and I never did see him anymore. But then the five of us stayed together for about 3 weeks. They marched us every day, night that way. You wasn't going to sleep none. You might doze off or something, but then they'd keep you moving here and yonder. And then I don't know where the lieutenant went, and they took him somewhere else. But they wasn't supposed to be any officers with us anyway.
Mm-hmm.
There wasn't any officers in the camp. I mean, in where we was at. Now, there might have been some in the camp, but if it was in the different sections, it wasn't with us.
Yeah. Okay.
But then when we got, like I said, when we was down there at 317, then well, after this one spoke up and said he was a lieutenant and we'd do what he said, but he just well said, "I'm just like you. You do whatever you want to, because that's what we're doing."
Yeah. Okay.
And of course, right before I got captured, now we was fighting in them hedgerows over in France.
Tell us a little bit about that.
And and that's where you started out, in the hedgerows. The hedgerows were there, and I mean that was rough. You'd be on one side and the Germans would be on the other, and that was close. Just over a hedgerow there, and man, the head go up, boom! You'd hear a shot, and the head go down. If you done that, we was in there. I had a pack on. I had my sea rations in the pack, and I went to eat my open can one night and didn't have no juice in there, and there's a bullet hole through the can.
Yeah.
Went all the way through. Went through the pack and all, but the juice done run out. I didn't know that. But I opened it and there it was.
Close, wasn't it?
Right. I got that close. But then you'd fight in there, and then you'd get, the Germans would move of a night. They'd move all night, and then about late in the afternoon the next day you'd catch up with them.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's when you'd actually fight. But then that night, well, then they'd move again. They'd just keep it going back, you see, retreating. And then the daytime, take you all day to catch them just about. And then late in the evening, well, you'd start fighting again. Bullets, I've seen people get hit. I was fortunate. I never did get hit, but I've GIs close to me and then they'd start hollering, "Medic, medic, medic." And I'll tell you another time was in Ulms, France, ULMS, Ulms. And there was a GI with the lieutenant colonel was in charge of it. And in this town, GI go across, and the sniper up in the church steeple, shoot, GI'd fall down. Some of them, I've seen 4 or 5 of them do the same thing, and they all didn't get killed, but there's 1 or 2 would holler, "Medic, medic." And this colonel, me and another GI sitting there, and we were waiting, we were just sitting there, wasn't sitting, we squatted down with our pieces. And this lieutenant colonel come up there and they said, "You and you go across." I said, "I ain't going." He said, "What?" I said, "I'm not going." I said, "Don't you see them people out there, them GIs out there now?" I said, "That sniper up there knocking them out just fast as you get up there. I'll have you court-martial when you get back to the States." I said, "That's good." I said, "You're not supposed to send me anywhere you won't go." I said, "If you go, I'll go with you." But I said, "I ain't going." But he poked me and the other boy too, said, "You and you go over." And the other boy didn't go either, but he didn't tell him he wasn't going, but I told him I wasn't going. And we didn't go. Now, I don't know whatever happened to the lieutenant colonel, because I got captured a few days after that, and I don't know whether he's still living or not. But I refused the order. But I think the book says if that officer won't go, you don't go either. They're not supposed to send you anywhere that they wouldn't go.
Yeah.
And I told him, and I said, well, if you go, I'll go with you. But I said, I ain't going unless you go.
Mm-hmm.
But he didn't go, and I didn't either. The other boy didn't either.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But somebody finally got the sniper out of the church anyway.
Mm-hmm. Good.
That's the only order I ever refused.
Yeah.
I didn't go.
Mm. Yeah.
And I didn't get court-martialed either. Of course, I don't know what happened to him. I know what happened to me.
Yeah. Well, whenever you were back over here and getting ready to get discharged, what was the process to discharge you?
What did I do to get discharged, you mean?
Yes, sir.
Well, like I said, they had to have, at that time, you had to have 85 points. And I had 83, and I was in Miami in September, and I went to, no, it wasn't September either. It was, I was home 3 months, about August, I guess. I was down there, and I went Fort Myer, Virginia, and drove a bus up there in Washington,
Mm-hmm.
hauling GIs around different places up there. And then when I done that for that period of time, and when I got my 85 points, well, the captain called me in. Well, you want in, you going to stay in, you want to stay in and re-enlist? I said, I just want that little thing, give you a sheet, whatever they call that, a sheepskin or something. I said, I just want that little duck so I can go home.
Mm.
I said, no, I don't want to re-enlist at all. So when my time was up, I had my points, and I got out in November '45.
Go on home right then?
Sir?
Did you head on home right then?
Yeah, went home right then. Yeah.
Hey, with your experience in the military, is there something that stands out that you think might have helped you with coping with life later on?
Yeah, well, I think there was a lot of right smart stuff that I learned a lot of stuff. I think everybody does. They might not say they do, but I think anybody that's in the service, you know how to, of course, the orders you get, you know when you're in there you're going to have to do what they tell you.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that learns you a whole lot when you get out in civilian doing too.
Yeah.
I think that was a big difference in my estimation, because I know I've worked different places and I could kind of sass them back, but in the service you don't do that. If that officer or the sergeant something tell you to do, you're going to do it. So that discipline, you get a lot of discipline, learn a lot.
And that discipline really helps you
That sure,
out.
yes, sir, did.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sure did. I actually think it helps anybody that's in there.
Well, do you think that there should be required service in the military now?
Do what now?
Do you think there should be a draft, or that people should serve in the military now?
Right. I think that every young fellow that comes up should go in and serve sometime. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think it would help. It would help a lot of people. It would help anybody that goes in there.
Mm-hmm.
Most of them, some of them might not, but the biggest percentage of people that go to the service, that's in the service, why, they're different in everyday life than what people that don't go in.
Yeah.
Just put it that way.
Yeah. Okay. Well, is there anything else that you would like to tell us about?
Yeah, I don't know. There's a whole lot of stuff that you could talk about and all. Some's good and some ain't. I can tell you one thing though. I might be soft-hearted, I guess, or something, but talking about the watches a while ago, this boy come in with an arm full of them. I was out in Nancy, France, after the war. After the war too, but after I got out of prison. And I went down into town there, and we'd take bicycles away from the Germans to ride them.
Uh-huh.
And this old German, he had railroad uniform on, and he had a watch chain. I seen this watch chain. Well, they took my watch off, but I always said, well, I'll just get me a watch from somebody. Well, went up to this old German, older-like fella, and he had his uniform on, his railroad uniform. They had this gold chain across his thing on his vest. I said, "Viel Hour." And I guess the old man must have thought I was going to take that watch, in which I had in mind doing. And he didn't take it out, and I said, asked him again, and he took it out, and then kind of tears come to his eye, and I couldn't take that old man's watch at all. I said, "Goodbye."
Well, good.
Just took it on and went on.
Okay.
I just couldn't do it. So that's one thing I didn't get. I did. About the only thing I got back from the Germans that way was I brought a German flag back with me. I don't know what I wanted with that, but anyway, I brought it back and I kept it, I guess, for 15, 20 years, and then it finally disappeared. I don't know where it ever went to. But I just couldn't take that old man's watch because he knew I was going to take it. He had that in his mind, and well, he was right. That's what I had in my mind, to get that watch. And I never seen one like it. It had a key. It was a pocket watch, gold, and it had a key that you wind it with the key.
Huh.
It didn't have a stem, you know, like we wind it, but it had a key. That would have been something to had something like that, but I just couldn't take it. I just told him goodbye and went on.
Okay. Anything else that you would like to tell us about then?
Yeah, I don't know. Ain't a whole lot. But yeah, when I come back, when I come back to the state, there's other things I'd tell, but it's about our government then. Yeah. I had two brothers was in the service. One of them was a retired with the Air Force. He flew to Hump over in China, Burma. And he was in there till he retired. He retired major from the Air Force. And my oldest brother was in the quartermaster, and he was stationed, like I said, at Camp Lee, Virginia. It was Fort Lee now, I guess, Camp Lee back in. And he was well, they got the numbers now, but he was what they call a buck sergeant. That was a E5 now. So I took him home and all, and they could get anything they wanted after. Well, my youngest brother, of course, he stayed in till he was retired, 20-some years. But they could get anything from the VA, seemed like. And when I come back, I had teeth problems. I went to the VA, and all they told me it wasn't service connected, and I never could get nothing from the VA.
Well, you think
Never did get nothing.
that teeth was from not having food?
That's what I told them. I said, "What do you mean not service connected?" I said, "I didn't have nothing." I said, "Go over and eat what they eat, or what they give you." And I said, "You probably have tooth problem too." And either one of my other brothers, they could go to the VA and get anything that they wanted, seemed like. No problem, no questions asked or nothing. But when I went, I couldn't get nothing. They never did. The only thing I got out of being a POW, the state of Kentucky gave me $1 a day for every day I was in there.
And you were in there a long time?
I was in there 9 months. Yeah. So I got $1 a day. And I didn't know I was going to get that till I got that. I don't know. I was out. I guess I was out about 5 or 6 years or more than that before I ever got that. And they just come up. Well, I did too. The state of Tennessee gave me a license plate. I get that. Well, I get 2 license plates. I got one under there, I think, that I took off my RV. I sold it here a while back. But the state of Tennessee gives me that.
Yeah.
And I've been getting that now for several years. But I'd go back in. I'd serve my country again. Of course, I'm too young to go in now. They wouldn't take me because I'm not 16. But
Yeah, me too.
But I'd go back in a minute, and like I said to start with there when we started out, they was going to draft me, and I just went down and signed up, and I just took somebody else's place that they was going to draft at that particular time.
Okay, well, Mr. May, we certainly do appreciate you taking the time to talk with us today.
I don't know whether I told you anything or not, but
Tell about that German interrogator. The German interrogator.
I did. Oh yeah,
Yeah.
well, when I went back in after they got halfway settled, instead of marching us all the time, we went in there and the German was interrogating us. So when I went in, when they called me in there to interrogate me, why this old German, he could talk this good English. He's weekend. Most of them could, and he said, "Well, you didn't last long." I said, "Well, don't worry about it." I said, "You ain't gonna last. Y'all ain't gonna last very long either." But it's a wonder if they hadn't shot me right then by saying that. Yeah, I don't know what he just come out and he told me, he said, "Well, you didn't last long," which I didn't. I understood that to start with. But he said, "You didn't last very long." I said, "Well, don't worry." I said, "Y'all ain't gonna last very long either." Yeah.
What was he asking you?
Huh?
What did he want to know?
Oh, he wanted to know where we was at and all that kind of stuff, and where it was. That's several. After we got captured, want to know where it got captured at and all that kind of stuff. And this, what Americans were doing, and all this and all that. Who my commanding officer was, I didn't tell him nothing like they tell you to do. Your name, rank, and serial number. That's it. I just said no.
Okay, well, again, we certainly do appreciate you taking the time.
Most of the Germans. Now I've seen German guards hit GIs up on the head, side the head with the butt of a gun, or hit them somewhere. I even seen one stick a bayonet in one's leg, but most of the time, I don't know. I might be different. Well, I guess I am different in a lot of ways. If them guards told me to do something, I went ahead and done it. I didn't try to, not do what they wanted. Too many of them, and you're already you ain't got no protection there other than your fist or something like that. You ain't got nothing to come back with them at, and they've got the guns on, And I've seen them do that, but the GIs are most of them, not all of them, because the SS, we got some SS troops there guarding us, and them dudes they was mean. Wasn't no question about that. Now them SS young ones, well, they'd hit you upside the head for nothing. Didn't make any difference to them. But most of the time when the GIs got hit or something like that, or that way, or got mistreated, they brought it on themselves. The biggest part of them did, I'd say.
Yeah.
I've seen that, yeah. But and another thing that they don't tell you, they tell you in the service, they give us an orientation down there in Alabama. If we got caught, if you get caught, you're a prisoner. Said all you want to do is try to escape. Well, that's a hard. You can talk that, but it's hard to escape. I've seen them try to get out, but they didn't get nowhere. It's just like being in the prison here in the United States. They had fences up, war and all that stuff, just like they do here.
It'd be pretty hard to get away from them.
It's hard to get away. Although there's some that did get away, I understand that too. But they told us down there 2 or 3 different times they had sessions down there in Anderson, old fella, about stuff like that. If you get caught, you do this, you do that, you do this and do that. It's easy to talk that stuff, but it's hard to do it.
Yeah.
Everybody ain't nobody wants to be a prisoner of war or a prisoner of anything, or I don't. I was just misfortunate. I was one of the misfortunate ones, I guess.
Yeah.
But I figured the reason I got to come back, I figured the good Lord had something He wanted me to do yet. And I think that's the reason I'm still living.
I think you're right.
There's not too many people my age that still gets around and does. Of course, I know that people older than me as far as that's concerned, but I figure I'm one of the fortunate ones anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
And the man up there is the one that caused it too.
Exactly.
I believe that with all of my heart.
Amen.
And this man right here, the little boy said I done got my everything paid for when I leave here. They even got him to talk about me.
Well, that's good.